Sierra Scott. What if I told you a lot of what you think you know about Darfur is wrong? In fact, most of the people telling you what's going on there have never been to Darfur at all. They've been standing across the border reporting from an entirely different country called Chad, which to me is like standing in Mexico and telling you what's going on in Houston, Texas. My crew and I recently spent 2 weeks traveling across Sudan, including Darfur, and this is what we saw.
First, it's not one Darfur crisis, it's 4 or 6 Darfur crises, and it's at different levels. This is what we have been telling people for a long time now. This is not one problem which one conference and one document which you sign will solve.
Before we get into what all the issues are, let's take a look at the basics. Darfur is located on the western side of Sudan. Situated in northeast Africa, Sudan is the largest country on the continent and is surrounded by 9 different countries. It's bordered by Egypt to the north, Libya to the northwest, Ethiopia and Eritrea to the southeast, Congo, Uganda, and Kenya to the south, and the Central African Republic and Chad to the west. This is information that will be important to the story later on. Sudan is about 1 million square miles, which is about a fourth the size of the United States. Sudan is divided into 26 different states. Darfur encompasses 3 of them. There's North Darfur, West Darfur, and South Darfur state. Darfur itself is larger than the entire country of France. The Sudanese don't share a fascination with statistics, numbers, and facts, so sometimes it was hard to get them to answer questions that involve percentages and numerical comparisons. So I'll do my best to give you the information I could confirm and tell you what I witnessed to fill in the rest. We began our journey in Khartoum, the country's capital city and their equivalent of Washington, D.C. While in Khartoum, we met with a college professor and former Harvard University attendee. Dr. Awad-Eljied is the leading expert on Darfurian issues and has written numerous books, including this one called Cultural Liberty in a Diverse Sudan. When experts want to know factual and historical information about Darfur, this is the man they ask. He's even been asked to share his knowledge in Geneva.
I think this is a special problem which reached the level it's on now, not through something triggered something, but through accumulation. And it is not the kind of problem which will be solved by signing anything.
Everyone who knows Darfur and knows the history of the problem of Darfur realizes that it is not the fault of this particular government. This is a problem that has been ongoing for decades, actually for centuries.
Before we talk about the issues and the people we saw during our journey, there are a few myths we want to dispel. Number 1, this is not a religious war. Depending on whose statistics you rely upon, only between 5 and 15% of the entire population in Sudan is Christian, and the majority of Christians live in Khartoum, where they worship in churches like this one that have been here for centuries. The rest are scattered in the southern part of the country. There's just one place in all of Sudan. There are absolutely none.
That there isn't a single Christian in Darfur at all. أصله ما في Christian in Darfur. On the contrary, this is one of the regions of Sudan where maybe the strongest Muslim affiliation is found. People in Sudan used to call Darfur, and they call Darfur up to now, the Quran state. Because children in Darfur, the first thing they learn is the Quran. This is not a religious problem at all. It's Muslim killing Muslim, unfortunately.
A statement that's echoed by a Coptic priest as well.
There is no Christian at all in Darfur, you see.
The second myth being told is that this is a racial issue. It's actually a tribal issue. It's because of their tribal affiliations that some of these Darfurians are fighting.
It's not an Arab-African problem. There are tenets of that. Because yes, there are groups who are the Arab groups, and there are other groups who are, you can call them fairly, the African group. This is true. But the conflict is not based on the ethnic thing like it is in other countries. This came up later on when people try to seek ideology or extra reasoning or anything. They said it's the Arabs. They say it's African groups. But it is not exactly that.
What it is a conflict between tribes in the north of Darfur and tribes in the south of Darfur, which Dr. Awad-Eljied says was caused by something we have no control over.
Sometimes it is Mother Nature, because environmental degradation is a real problem which has been taking toll of the totality of Darfur for the last 50 years. Not government, not anybody did anything to help in that issue.
Many of the northern tribes are nomadic herders. Most of the tribes in the south are settled farmers.
Almost 40% of the population of Darfur are nomads.
In the past, when winter began, the nomadic herders brought their animals south, since it gets drier in the north during that time of year, and the herds need food and water to survive.
They have been doing this for the last 2-3 centuries, because there will be no rain in the desert in the north and nothing at all for their animals, and there was a system.
And that worked well, since the farmers in the south had already picked their crops, so most didn't mind if camels, goats, or other livestock ate the stalks left behind. Then things changed. Two things combined to cause problems there. First, the Sahara Desert is expanding, so the nomadic herders aren't going as far north as they used to. And scientists say that's a problem that's only going to get worse over time.
And they know that within 6 years, desert will be in such and such place. We all know that. So this is an encroaching thing which has been going on all the time. Every year, arable land is lost to the desert, and every year the nomads will have to shorten their stay in the north.
In my area, the rains used to come in March, and which is in the center of southern Sudan. The rain used to come during March. Now we don't have rain until June, a delay of 3 months.
Which means some nomadic herders are coming south with their animals before the farmers have harvested their crops. So the farmers are taking action to protect their land, while the nomads claim the land belongs to everyone, so their animals should be free to graze wherever they want.
But because Mother Nature changed, and we did not change, we are doing the same thing the same way, conflict came. Ended up by small fights, then after some time bigger fights, and then it began to define itself into geographical zones, tribal zones, ideological zones.
In order to prevent the nomads and farmers from fighting over land rights, the government has set up what it calls displacement camps all across Darfur. They're designed to give nomads a place to stay. Our trip to Darfur began in Al-Fashir, the capital of northern Darfur state. The city is home to one of the largest displacement camps in the country.
I would like to welcome the American delegation to the camp.
There used to be 54,000 displaced people here in El Salam camp alone. Now there are about 38,000 here.
The Al Salam camp has been opened 2004.
Well, in Khartoum, we ran into a former CNN reporter who told me to start shooting video the minute we landed in Al-Fashir and have them tell me when we crossed into the camps. At the time, I didn't understand why she was telling me to do that, but as we drove into that camp, it became apparent. If I were to show you video shot inside the camp without putting it into perspective, you'd think people living here were being forced to live in deplorable and unacceptable conditions. And while the conditions are not what we as Americans consider to be acceptable, the truth of the matter is, people all over the country, even outside the camps, are living at that same standard. This is video shot outside the camp. This is video shot inside the camp.
Life here is very stable, as you will see it in a few minutes. I am sure you have been told that there is a lot of rapes, a lot of genocide, and a lot of harassment. We hear the same news that you hear, and we are surprised at what is being said. We don't see it. We ask you to go and see for yourself.
Once inside the camp, we were taken to the market, where the food was fresh and plentiful.
As you can see in the market, there is a lot of food. Most of the products are supplied by the people of the camp, and they produce it themselves. The Sudanese government is responsible for about 70% of the food supplied to the camp.
Despite the extreme poverty, the children we saw here were not starving. They were clean and well taken care of. Most were laughing, playing, and having fun like children anywhere in the world, no matter what their circumstances do.
Good. What are you going to be when you grow up? You're going to be a teacher? You're going to be an engineer? You're going to be a doctor? What are you going to be? هتبقي شنو لما تبقي كبيرة؟
تبقي شنو؟
ها؟ You want to be a teacher? Medical doctor? ها؟ هتبقي شنو؟ مهندس engineers.
And they have dreams and goals, just like our children do.
Look at the children. See how they are healthy. Compare these children's life with the children inside the town. Yes, you will find their life more healthy than the children inside the town. Some of them are living better life than myself. Believe me.
Women here were also walking freely throughout the streets, not cowering in fear of being raped as we were told by the media to expect.
I'm happy, I'm fine.
Just to show us this wasn't an aberration, we were taken to another camp called Abu Shoka as well.
All the displaced people from complete different tribes and different backgrounds live in peace and harmony.
For some, living in the camps is actually better than their nomadic life. The Sudanese government, the United Nations, and a few other agencies have joined together to offer 5 services here.
Education is the top priority we provide. We have 17 schools that accommodate all children within the camp.
But that's not the only group being educated in the camp. Since 80% of the adults across Darfur are illiterate, they're given free reading classes as well. People also get free medical care here. There are 11 medical centers scattered throughout this camp, and each family is allowed to take water from one of 45 different wells.
Each individual is given between 8 and 10 liters a day.
Security forces like these guard the camps at all times to prevent any attacks by rebels.
We do have a police station within the camp.
The people that are within the camp, are they allowed freely to come and go, or do they have to stay in the camp or move away?
This is an open camp. They have complete freedom to come and go.
So far, 16,000 have left this camp to return to their homes. You can see the hundreds of houses that have been left empty by their departure.
They are eagerly looking forward to go back to their homes and village and to get on with their lives.
But going home may not be as easy as it sounds. Since the nomads have been gone, rebels have stolen their animals and taken over their land.
They are against the government, so they are against anything to make this region stable. This is why they come and they hit sometimes these people companies who make services for people.
As Dr. Awad-Eljied said earlier, this is not a simple issue. Disagreements between the nomads and the farmers are only part of the problem. This area is home to as many as 300 different tribes who speak over 100 different languages and dialects. So some are unable to talk to each other. And as I said earlier, 80% are illiterate, so they're unable to read any peace agreements either.
Darfur is a vast area where you have tribal feuds and conflicts, and it reflects itself into skirmishes and wars. But in our modern world, with heavy machine guns and mortar guns and RPGs, etc., the dimension of the problem grew and became bigger.
One of the major problems was caused when the borders surrounding Sudan were drawn by Europeans many years ago.
15 of the Darfurian tribes are, as a matter of fact, divided between Darfur and Chad. This is because of the arbitrary intervention of the colonizer, who came with a ruler and drew a line and said these are the borders between Sudan and Chad.
A border these tribes don't really acknowledge.
We cannot solve the problem of Darfur without solving the problems of Chad. Everybody now is talking about Darfur, forgetting the instability, the tribal problems, the violence, the interlinkages with Sudan, which is affecting Chad.
Some of the refugees in Chad are believed to be crossing the border to fight against those in Sudan. As one person explained to me, one man's freedom fighter is another man's rebel. So sometimes it's hard to tell the good guys from the bad guys here.
Everyone knows that Chad supports the rebels in Darfur for tribal reasons, not for humanitarian reasons. because Chad happens to be ruled by the same group of the Zaghawa people, the tribe called Zaghawa, which lives in Darfur as well. It's a tribe that straddles the border between Chad and Sudan.
Again, I want to stress that fighting is going on in Darfur, and not all places are as peaceful as this one.
Can you tell me that there is no problem in America? No. Every country have problems.
Not that it makes it right, but atrocities being committed in the Congo are much worse than what's happening in Darfur. So why is so much more attention being focused here?
Played up by some people who wish to have, who gain from doing so.
That Darfur is rich in mineral resources. That may help me, and at least I feel comfortable with that explanation when I ask myself, why are these people as interested as they are in issues relating to Darfur?
You have oil, you have huge deposits of bauxite and minerals, strategic minerals, including uranium.
Darfur also has gold, silver, and diamonds that it doesn't have the technology nor the money to get out of the ground at this point. If Darfur were to break away from Sudan and become an independent country, other countries could benefit from helping them. So some may have a stake in escalating the violence.
We know that we are a very, very, very wealthy country in terms of resources, but we need to develop these resources, we need to use these resources, and we need the world to seek with us how we can get the chance to use our own resources.
It's a country with a huge potential for Africa. If it were to become developed, it could become the powerhouse for the whole region. It's the biggest African country. Potentially, it's the richest country.
It's not just resources that have the potential to help others make a lot of money off this area. Some of the so-called humanitarian aid groups are making a lot of money off this conflict as well. Abu Shoka's camp director says most of the money donated to those organizations never makes it here.
Out of the money being donated, only 20% gets to us, and the rest goes overhead costs.
Those among the others who are serious about the issue, there are others who benefit from this. They collect money, millions. Actually, what comes down here and trickle to the people is between 10 and 20%. Where did the other go?
Everyone knows that there's something called Save Darfur Coalition in the United States, which is raising money, which is not being spent on Darfur. Everyone knows that the money is not being spent on Darfur. The money is being spent on themselves.
Dr. Awad-Eljied and his colleagues have been studying this problem for years, and they say one of their solutions is to get the tribes themselves to work together.
One of the important ideas is try to bring the issues back to the people of Darfur. The one actor who is not a real party in all this are the people of Darfur. Government is doing things on their behalf. The international community, including the UN, are doing things on their behalf. Certain governments are playing the role of God or something, trying to solve everybody's problem without knowing what the problem really is. But the people of Darfur, one of the suggestions we gave is, why not try bring the issues back to the people and ask them what sort of solutions they want.
Dr. Awad-Eljied says irresponsible reporting about this situation has only compounded the problem.
I think they are doing more damage than good to the problem of Darfur. They are not doing good to Darfur, absolutely, but by creating these acute poles of Arab-African, of throwing into this whole bloody thing, sorry for the expression, big words like genocide, crimes against humanity. Yes, there are crimes, yes. And there are people killed, this is true. But it's not to the size of genocide. I know genocide now. And I am one of the people who helped the UN in Africa. I have been to Liberia, I worked for some time, to Sierra Leone, I have been to Mozambique. I am older than I look, and I have been to the fairest phases of Somalia. What's happening in Darfur is definitely not genocide. So the people in the States are using big, huge language, which is not representative really of what's going on, to an extent that sometimes the reaction of government, the US government in Sudan, seem to their diplomats here bigger than the general conception of foreigners and of Sudanese, as if throwing an atomic bomb in a tribal fight.
Another solution to this problem lies just a few feet below the battlefields. Dr. Eljied says all they need is for someone to help them dig a few water wells in the north.
About the Nubian sand rock basin, they say this is the biggest underground water basin in the world. So we need technology for that, and we need money for that. If the nomads of the north got 1/3 of the water they need, they will stay there. They will not go down there to create problem to anybody. And then the whole economy of Darfur will change. There are certain areas in Darfur where if only 20 wells were dug, that will change the relationships between the downcoming nomads and the sedentaries right in front of them.
The problem is, no one wants to help them dig those wells.
Haphazard way the media addresses issues. Media is always for the hype. Media focuses on the negative. Violence, rape, killings, refugees, poverty, displaced people. They focus on that.
Here's another myth we're happy to dispel. The people here aren't allowed to say what they think. During our interview, Dr. Eljied freely expressed his opinions without fear of retribution.
What I support and what I don't support. I don't support these people, this government, but I'm trying to help them come out of this mess.
And we found signs like these all over college campuses expressing opposition to the government. There's also another thing most of us conveniently forget. Less than 150 years ago, we had a war between North and South. Well, Darfur isn't the only place where a campaign of misinformation and outright lies seem to reign. First of all, not all women in Sudan are being forced to wear the traditional dress called a sari. Many of them do not. Before leaving Sudan, I researched clothing requirements on the internet. All I could find were websites that warned me that I had to cover my head, wrists, and ankles, or risk being harassed or even jailed.
But this is not the truth.
The clothing, I know we see it as restrictive, but you don't. You're not being forced to wear it, where I think we thought that men were forcing you to dress in a certain way.
This is a kind of believing, my way of dressing. This is a personal behavior. The way you are dressing, it is your own identity, your own way of wearing the clothes. Even in USA, some of you, they are wearing tiny skirts, some they are wearing wide trousers, some they are wearing a very long skirt and with the long sleeve. So it shows who are you. And by the way, anything by force, it will not last long.
I have to say I was surprised to find many women wearing clothes that made them almost indistinguishable from American women. Here I am standing with a Sudanese ambassador. Looking at our clothes, it's hard to tell us apart. To prove our point further, we took random pictures of Sudanese women. Then we took pictures of women in Wichita, Kansas as well. Now we'll put you to the test. Which is which? If you said this was an American, you're wrong. Well, how about this one? It was taken in Sudan as well. Now this one was actually taken in Wichita. This was in Sudan again. Not what you expected, huh? Their dress is not only modest, it's also functional. Trust me, you want a scarf handy when the occasional dust storm breaks out. And believe it or not, after a few days, I began to prefer this style of dressing to the rock-style wannabes you find crowding the streets of America. And honestly, it wasn't that many years ago Americans dressed pretty much the same way. There's some other misconceptions surrounding Sudan I want to clear up. Another myth that's being bandied about is since a majority of the population is Muslim, women here aren't allowed to be educated and are forced to stay home and have babies. This is proof that that just isn't true. The first all-women's college was founded in Rufaa by Bob Cree Bedri back in 1907.
Women in Sudan have the freedom to choose to be educated, and it's more important to them than ever before.
Now, all colleges across Sudan accept women. In fact, the majority of students are female.
65% of the students are female, 35% are male. There's a huge competition between boys and girls in college here. Girls are always the top of the class. The top of the class are girls.
Some colleges like the University of Awad have entire curriculums that focus on women, gender, and development studies. These students told me they actually have a lot of freedom. They choose their major.
80% of agriculture college is made up of female students. We can choose our own major, and we choose agriculture because Sudan is an agriculture country. Getting a major in agriculture has an opportunity for a great future and a huge success. Our country is really progressing and moving forward. That's why we are looking forward to the future.
These students say they get to decide who they want to spend the rest of their lives with as well.
We get to choose who we marry and when we marry.
It's not just students who are female, though.
You will find the teacher or the lecturer in the university, they are half of them, they are women.
There is equal chances for women. They can compete with men. Among these 7 departments, as it has been said, 5 of them are led or headed by women.
So like watching TV. I told you we had to get an early start. No.
We're told that women are not allowed to do things, women are not considered equal. How do you respond to that? What would you tell people in America?
Oh, this is a question that I love to answer, because the image of us outside, it is not the truth that we are live. We are very active in our society. We have no any hinder.
While in Sudan, I also met a former female Supreme Court justice who's now a legal advisor to the president, a former minister who has since founded her own political party, a university professor who spent
about 38 years teaching English in the Darfur state, in Sudan, different parts of the Sudan, the north, the west, and so on. I have never felt any discrimination, especially regarding education.
I also met a female ambassador. This is one of many female attorneys here, and one of many female doctors. This woman is vice president of a university. While in Sudan, I was even interviewed by female journalists on Omdurman Radio and Blue Nile Television.
Assalamu alaikum. See, I'm learning. Many. We have federal ministers. We have state ministers. We have Wali advisors. And we have Wali before. Governor. Wali, it is the governor. We have governor before. And also we have many ambassadors.
7 female ambassadors to be exact. Nearly 25% of the parliament here is female, which is actually higher than the United States. 17% of our Congress are females.
90% of our Ministry of Finance, they are women. And they are leading the departments of the financial ministry. 90%. And Nafisa Ahmed Al-Amin, the group start to build the Sudanese Women Union.
This is a list of women who were the first to serve in a number of positions ranging from Supreme Court judge to family doctors.
This is the history of the Sudanese women in a small.
Here's another thing that may surprise you. In some ways, the Sudanese people are even more technologically connected than we are. My cell phone worked no matter where I was in the country. In fact, many of the people we came across had a cell phone, no matter how remote their location.
We have Africa's best communication. The network here is the best in Africa and in the Middle East. We started building it in 1993.
And no matter how small the village we came across, we were surprised to find satellite dishes scattered everywhere. Another thing that might surprise you is the fact that Sudan has some amazing museums, some of which contain artifacts that feature the Virgin Mary, Christ, archangels, saints, and apostles. The National Museum of Sudan features dozens of frescoes from Christian Nubia. Despite lasting 700 years, Sudan's early Christian kingdoms are little known to the outside world. Earlier in this story, we told you that the disputes in Darfur are not based on religion and that most of the Christians are based in Khartoum. Father Makandidi says he grew up in a community filled with Muslims.
Even my personal conviction is that we really don't have problems, religious problems. This is my personal conviction. We existed always side by side. To my opinion, it seems it was really politicized.
Since Christians are definitely in the minority here, we talked to some to find out if they've been discriminated against or harassed in any way.
There is no difference between Christian and Muslim in our country. And we love, all of us live in loveness.
And myself, I'm a Christian. We live in one family, we live in one house. Our kids, some of them are Muslims, some of them are Christians, in the same family. We don't have that sensitivity.
And David should know. He's a Christian. His brother is a Muslim. We even witnessed a Christmas pageant while we were here. Who would have imagined that? U.S. sanctions against this country have really taken a toll.
This is affecting the whole nation, actually, and especially the refugees, patients, and the needy.
As in most countries we have sanctions against, the sanctions don't seem to affect the governments. They always seem to be able to find ways to survive. It's the average person who's really suffering because of them.
And we are being labeling by putting us in some lists that hinder us from taking any kind of loan from bilateral or multilateral. And with that, many conflict it is happening in the country, and this conflict also it is affect us as a people in the whole Sudan.
Because of U.S. sanctions, Sudan Air isn't able to get parts for its airplanes, so mechanics are cannibalizing parts from other planes to keep them flying. But that's not the only problem. They can't get the computers and software they need to provide electronic tickets either. The country can't use trains to transport things across the country either. Most of the train tracks across this country are silent. Of the 135 trains they used to have, 106 were American-made. Because they can't get parts for their trains either, only 16 are still running.
But for aid from the north to go to the south, we had to have railway engines. And it so happened that the railway engines which we had previously in the Sudan since the 60s were American engines. Okay? Then we needed spare parts. They said, no, you are under sanctions. You can't have spare parts. But said these are spare parts for engines, for trains which are supposed to take your humanitarian aid.
Sanctions have taken the biggest toll on the country's infrastructure.
The suffering has been very high. No development has been taking place in most parts of the Sudan for years. But when we talk about transport facilitate development, facilitate integration and unity of the people.
Although Sudan is more than 1 million square miles, there are only 37,000 miles of paved road inside it. That means there are huge areas that can only be reached by camel or donkey. It can take as many as 3 to 4 days to get from Khartoum to Darfur that way. Sanctions have also taken a toll on farmers. This area in Al Jazeera is fertile enough to feed most of Africa, but since they can't get tractors, they have to farm every acre by hand, which, as you can imagine, severely limits their production. Sanctions even threaten to stunt the country's mental growth.
There is no exchange of students or exchange of faculty staff members or
You know, for many years now, Sudan as a whole has been under the constraint of not, having access to the international community. It means that, in fact, our staff members have not had access to go out and study. That is, training is a major problem. And even those who are trained would ideally now want to retrain them, because we have been telling ourselves that we are now teaching the history of our subjects, because of this lack of access to the latest journals or going to other universities, more advanced universities, where you could go, say, for a month or 2 months and browse through the library, interact with others and so on, so that you know exactly where the cutting edge in one specialization is.
In other words, without access to the most advanced technology and techniques, doctors, engineers, and even accountants can't reach their full potential here.
You can only change the mentality of the people, you can change the psyche if you give them hope. And you cannot give them hope and show them the road to the future unless you really develop the country in terms of its financial resources, economic resources, human resources.
Despite strict sanctions that keep all American products and companies out of Sudan, there are at least 2 companies that have a strong presence here. You see Pepsi and Coca-Cola just about everywhere. I was told these companies have been given an exemption because Sudan has something they need, gum arabic that's used in a lot of soft drinks. The gum trees here are considered to be the best in the world. Despite our lack of support, Sudan is moving on and moving up. There's a huge building boom underway that's changing the face of this country by the minute. In Khartoum, there's construction just about everywhere you look.
Sudan is among the 10 fastest growing economies in the world. Despite the war, despite the isolation, despite denying us development and even spare parts for our railway engines. So we've been doing that despite all the difficulties. This should tell you that you are dealing with determined people and people who have ideas.
Sudan also manufactures its own cars. This is Awad-Eljied, a car created by the Hyundai company that is assembled here at this plant outside of Khartoum. And here's another thing you probably didn't expect to see here, a world-class golf course. It's under construction right outside of Khartoum. These are plans they have for a future development project. This is a site where they've chosen to build it. As you can see, ground has already been broken. They hope to have it completed in 2010. There is one thing that makes a huge impact on everyone who visits this country. It's the warmth and hospitality of all the people who live here.
The Sudanese are outgoing people. They are very positive and always look for the good side of things.
That's for sure. Although many of these people have nothing, and I don't mean nothing in the American sense. They really have nothing here. They're willing to share what little they do have with you. Time and time again, perfect strangers offered to share their food, make us tea, and gave us jewelry right off their bodies. While shooting video in a Darfurian village in Al Jazeera, a woman ran out to invite us to her home. She thought we looked hot and tired and offered to make us tea and a snack, even though that was probably all she had to feed her family that day. At one point during my trip, I miscalculated and accidentally overpaid my bill by the equivalent of $50 American when I was buying something. The average Sudanese makes the equivalent of $100 a month, which means that employee could have kept that money and made a fortune that month. Yet, rather than keep it, the store employee sent someone chasing after me so she could give me my money back. Had she not done that, I never would have known it. Another woman I met only briefly along the way spent 2 hours putting henna on my hands and feet so I could attend a formal dinner in style. For all the time she spent, she asked nothing in return. But the situation that had the biggest impact on me was an 8-year-old girl who took the only valuable thing she had, a necklace most American children would throw away, and put it around my neck. That necklace is hanging on my bathroom mirror, and every day I see it, I think of her. And that's what gave me the inspiration I needed to write this story. I just want her to have the chance at a better life. I have to admit, I just fell in love with the people of this country. As I told you, no matter where I went or who I talked to, I was always welcomed with open arms. No matter where we're from, when it comes right down to it, we all just want the same things. We want peace, we want happiness, we want love, and we want our children to have better lives than we had. With so little, you'd think they'd want a lot from us. They don't. All they asked of me was one simple thing.
ونريد منكم أقصى الحقائق لأهل السودان لأهل الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية أن التسامح الذي نعيشه.
We request highly from you to reflect the facts, the reality here on the ground, to all the international communities, to all the media, to your people in the United States of America, to reflect the real situation in Darfur.
At the end of every interview, I asked people what they wanted from the United States, and every one of them, whether a government employee or a villager, said the same thing. They don't want aid. They didn't ask for food. They didn't even want us to give them money.
We need people to clarify these things and to tell the story, tell the facts.
You just tell them what you have seen here. Actually, everything is just we are very comfortable what we are doing. There is no problem. I can go wherever I want to go, and I can. It's just normal. It's not normal. We are not the best of the world. We are not the worst.
Getting a chance to show the people that we are not different than them, and we have our own identity. Maybe it is not like there, but at the end, we are all human beings.
In other words, they just wanted me to go back and tell you what I saw with my own eyes. Well, I hope I fulfilled my promise, for this is what I saw. I'm not saying that Sudan is a perfect country or that there aren't areas where fighting is going on, because there are. What I am saying is that the majority of that country is full of generous, loving, kind, and peaceful people, so we should give them attention as well. Just to set the record straight, the government did not pay me to make this video. They did not prevent me from videotaping anything I wanted, nor did they look over our shoulders while we were shooting. Some people are going to say that I only saw what the government wanted me to see. Well, that's just not true. I was never told where I could drive, and I was never prevented from talking to anyone. I was given free rein to travel across the country as I pleased, and I was able to interview anyone I came across.